cold CEO faints at the clinic and wakes to find the nurse who saved him is the girl he fired years ago. When Alejandro Cole, a ruthless CEO, collapses and is rushed to the clinic, he wakes up to find that the nurse who saved his life is Catalina Carlos, the woman he fired years ago. As Alejandro recovers, he begins to see Catalina in a new light, appreciating her strength and compassion. Meanwhile, Catalina struggles with her feelings for Alejandro, torn between her past hurt and her growing admiration for the man he has become. As they spend more time together, they must confront their past and decide if they can build a future together. The door to the emergency room burst open with a crash, and a pair of paramedics rolled in a stretcher at full speed. "Male, mid-30s, unresponsive," one shouted, his voice sharp with urgency. "Pulse fainting, suspected myocardial infarction, pulse faint, pressure dropping fast." The fluorescent lights above flickered slightly as Catalina Carlos stepped into the chaos, already pulling on gloves. She had just returned from checking on a post-op patient recovering from minor surgery. But all it took was one look at the incoming stretcher for every ounce of her training to surge into focus. "Get him on oxygen. Prep the crash cart. Monitor leads now," she said, her voice calm and clipped. Around her, nurses and technicians moved like a well-oiled machine, responding to her commands without hesitation. The man on the stretcher was pale, his lips tinged with blue, sweat glistening across his brow, and his shirt clung to his chest, soaked through. One of the paramedics had already removed his tie and was unbuttoning the top few buttons of his dress shirt. Another was attaching the defibrillator pads to his bare chest. Catalina leaned over him, slipping the oxygen mask over his face and gently tilting his head. Her fingers reached automatically for his wrist to check his pulse, but as she focused on his features, everything in her came to a halt. The sharp jawline, the slight cleft in his chin, the way his dark hair, though tousled, still managed to fall neatly to the side, and just under his chin, a faint scar she hadn't seen in years. Her breath caught. No, it couldn't be. She leaned in closer, adjusting the mask again, trying to keep her hands from trembling as his head lolled slightly to the side. Her eyes met the full view of his face, and the realization hit her like a thunderclap. Alejandro Cole. Her hands froze above his chest. Her body went cold. The room didn't spin. Her world did. Her heart pounded louder than the beeping monitors. In that moment, time bent, warped. It was no longer an emergency room under fluorescent light. It was 5 years ago in a boardroom, stark white walls, a quiet nod, a signature, and her world falling apart. She remembered everything. The way her hands had shaken as she held the dismissal letter, the confusion, the humiliation, the accusation of incompetence that hadn't been hers to bear. She'd been set up by a superior, used as a scapegoat for an error she had tried to prevent. But he hadn't asked questions, hadn't looked her in the eye. He had just signed the termination without hesitation, without humanity. And now, here he was. Alejandro Cole, once her idol, her silent infatuation, and then her greatest source of betrayal, unconscious, vulnerable, breath slipping from his ear. "Catalina?" Dr. Green's voice pierced her trance, firm and direct. "We need compressions now." Her hands hovered just a second too long, but then instinct surged forward, louder than pain, louder than pride, louder than the ache of memories threatening to break her. She moved. "Catalina Carlos, performing cardiopulmonary resuscitation," she said aloud, her voice steady. She lowered her hands to his chest and began compressions, each one sharp and rhythmic. 3, 4. Dr. Green hovered near the monitors, charging the defibrillator to 200. "Come on, stay with us." IV lines were connected, medications administered, epinephrine injected. The team moved with mechanical grace, but Catalina stayed focused, her arms burning with every press. She didn't let herself think, not about who he was, not about what he had done, just the simple, solemn truth that a life was slipping away beneath her hands. "Clear," the technician called. She stepped back as the paddles discharged, jolting his body. The flat line on the monitor jumped once, then again. A heartbeat. It was faint, but it was there. The room collectively exhaled. Catalina leaned back, her chest heaving, sweat clinging to her temples, her gloves damp. But her eyes never left his face. He was alive. Dr. Green gave her a quick pat on the shoulder. "Nice work, Carlos. That was close." She nodded, unable to speak. Her throat was tight because it wasn't just about the heart they had saved. It was about his heart and everything he'd taken from hers. As Alejandro was stabilized and transferred to the monitoring room, hooked up to a ventilator and sedated, Catalina remained rooted in place. She watched through the glass, the chaos slowly fading into silence around her. The past had walked through the emergency room doors, broken, breathless, and bleeding out. And this time, she had been the one with the power to decide his fate. She had chosen to save him, but somewhere deep within, beyond all logic and duty, she knew this story was far from over. The room was dimly lit, only by the soft hum of early morning light filtering through the window blinds. Machines beeped steadily around the hospital bed, the monitors tracing the rhythm of a heart, slowly regaining strength. The silence was calming, almost too calm for someone like Alejandro Cole. His eyelids fluttered, muscles twitching with the effort of coming back to consciousness. The weight of exhaustion pulled him down, but his mind, sharp and disciplined by years of corporate war zones, began to claw toward awareness. He inhaled, shallow but steady, then blinked his eyes open. White ceiling, faint antiseptic scent, monitors, and a silhouette standing by the window, holding a tablet dressed in scrubs. He blinked again. The figure moved towards him. Catalina saw the flicker of movement first, and her breath caught slightly. She had been preparing for this moment, but no amount of professionalism could stop her heart from thudding louder when she saw those eyes open. "Good morning, Mr. Cole," she said softly, her voice calm and even, though her hands were tense beneath her clipboard. Alejandro turned his head slowly, his throat dry. It took a moment for him to form words. "Where am I?" "You're in St. Vincent's Community Clinic," she replied. "You were brought in 2 days ago. Cardiac arrest. You've been under observation. You're stable now." His brow furrowed slightly as he studied her, as if trying to place a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. "And you are?" "Catalina." "Nurse Carlos," she replied, deliberately choosing formality. He nodded faintly, eyes lingering on her a second longer than necessary. There was something in her voice, calm but distant, something in the way she said his name without reverence or disdain, just knowledge. It unsettled him. "You've been my attending nurse." "Yes, since you arrived." He shifted in the bed, a wince flickering across his face as the soreness hit him. "How long was I unconscious?" "About 36 hours. We induced mild hypothermia to stabilize cardiac function. You responded well." "Good," he said. "I need to get my phone on me." Catalina didn't flinch, but she knew this was coming. The need for control, the need to return to the world he left in chaos. "We've kept your belongings secure," she said, "but the doctor recommends no work stress for at least a week. Your heart needs rest." Alejandro lay awake, staring at the ceiling long after the clinic had quieted. Catalina Carlos. How had he not realized? The girl from the marketing department, eager, quiet, quick on her feet. He remembered now how she had been blamed for a disastrous quarterly report, how she had cried when security escorted her out. He hadn't looked into the case. His COO had assured him it was handled. One signature, one less problem. He hadn't thought about it again until now. Guilt crawled through him, slow and sharp. He reached for the bedside table and pulled out his phone. With effort, he logged into his archived HR system. After several failed attempts and 2 password resets, he found the termination file. Catalina Carlos, dismissed for mishandling of financial presentation documents. No review, no appeal. Attached was a memo later forwarded privately to HR, stating that the department manager had admitted fault, but only after her dismissal. Alejandro's stomach twisted. He had ruined her career with a pen stroke, and now she had saved his life with both hands. He turned off the screen and lay in the dark, his breath shallow. He had built a career on decisiveness, on fast calls and clean breaks, but for the first time, he wondered how many others he had failed to see, and why did it matter so much that this woman, the one he had wronged the worst, had chosen to stay by his side. It mattered more than he was ready to admit. Alejandro didn't sleep that night, even after the monitors showed his vitals had returned to stable levels. After the nurses dimmed the lights and the clinic settled into its usual soft late-night hum, he lay awake, eyes wide open, jaw tight, mind spinning in relentless circles. The pulse monitor beeped in a steady rhythm, but his thoughts raced in a rhythm of their own. He couldn't stop thinking about what Catalina had said, her voice echoing through the sterile silence, low and edged with a pain he hadn't known he was capable of causing. He didn't even know my name. And the most damning part of it was, she was absolutely right. He hadn't at the time. She had been just another name in a stack of HR decisions, one file among dozens, a junior associate in a department flagged for inefficiencies. The quarterly report had been a disaster. A client had nearly walked away. The board was breathing down his neck, demanding accountability. His COO, Calvin Jensen, had assured him they had found the problem. She's young, sloppy, easily replaced. Alejandro hadn't questioned it. He had nodded, signed the termination letter, and moved on to the next crisis. The next morning, Catalina walked into Alejandro's room, her expression neutral, but her eyes guarded. She checked his vitals, adjusted the IV drip, and made notes on her tablet, all without meeting his gaze. "Catalina," Alejandro said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. She paused but didn't look up. "Yes, Mr. Cole? I need to talk to you." Catalina finally looked at him, her eyes meeting his for a brief moment before she glanced away. "About what?" Alejandro took a deep breath. "About what happened 5 years ago. I looked into it. I saw the memo. I know you were set up." Catalina's hand stilled on the tablet, her knuckles turning white as she gripped it tighter. And I'm sorry," Alejandro said, his voice steady but filled with regret. "I should have looked into it. I should have asked questions. I was wrong. And I'm sorry." Catalina's eyes widened slightly, surprise flickering across her face. She hadn't expected an apology, not from Alejandro Cole. She took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing just a fraction. "Thank you," she said softly. Alejandro watched her, his expression sincere. "I mean it, Catalina. I was wrong and I'm sorry. I can't change what happened, but I can try to make it right." Catalina looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of insincerity. But all she saw was genuine regret. She nodded slowly. "Okay?" Alejandro reached out, his hand hovering over hers for a moment before he pulled back. "I want to help. Whatever you need, whatever I can do to make this right, I will." Catalina's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but she blinked them away. "I don't need anything from you, Alejandro. I just need you to get better." Alejandro nodded, understanding her need for space. "I will. And when I do, I'll make sure you get the recognition you deserve. I'll make sure everyone knows the truth." Catalina's lips trembled slightly, but she managed a small smile. "Thank you." As she turned to leave, Alejandro called out to her, "Catalina?" She paused, looking back at him. "Yes?" "Thank you," he said softly, "for saving my life." Catalina's smile widened just a fraction. "You're welcome, Alejandro." As she left the room, Alejandro lay back against the pillows, his mind racing. He had a lot to make up for, and he was determined to do just that. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of purpose beyond his corporate ambitions. He felt a need to make things right, to redeem himself in the eyes of the woman who had saved his life. Over the next few days, Alejandro focused on his recovery, following the doctor's orders to the letter. He rested, avoided stress, and even managed to stay off his phone for most of the day. Catalina checked on him regularly, her demeanor professional but less guarded than before. She brought him books to read, ensured he was comfortable, and even stayed to chat with him occasionally, their conversations slowly becoming more natural and less strained. One afternoon, as Catalina was adjusting his IV drip, Alejandro looked up at her, his eyes soft. "You know, I never thanked you properly for saving my life." Catalina smiled, her eyes meeting his. "You don't have to thank me, Alejandro. It's my job." Alejandro shook his head. "It's more than that. You went above and beyond. You saved me, even after everything I did to you. That takes a special kind of person." Catalina's cheeks flushed slightly, but she didn't look away. "I just did what anyone would do." Alejandro reached out, his hand gently touching hers. "No, you did more. And I'll never forget it." Catalina's breath hitched, but she didn't pull her hand away. Instead, she looked at him, her eyes searching his. "You're welcome, Alejandro." Alejandro smiled, his thumb brushing lightly over her knuckles. "I mean it, Catalina. You're an amazing person, and I'm lucky to have you in my life." Catalina's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but she blinked them away. "Thank you," she whispered. As the days turned into weeks, Alejandro's health improved steadily. He was discharged from the clinic and returned to his penthouse, but he made sure to visit Catalina regularly, bringing her flowers, chocolates, and even taking her out to dinner a few times. Their bond deepened, and Catalina found herself looking forward to his visits, her heart fluttering every time she saw him. One evening, as they sat in a cozy Italian restaurant, Alejandro looked at Catalina, his eyes filled with warmth. "Catalina, I want to make things right. I want to give you the recognition you deserve. I want to make sure everyone knows the truth about what happened 5 years ago." Catalina looked at him, her eyes wide. "Alejandro, you don't have to do that." Alejandro shook his head. "I want to. I need to. It's the least I can do to make up for what I did to you." Catalina's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "Thank you, Alejandro. That means a lot to me." Alejandro reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I mean it, Catalina. I want to make things right, and I want to be a part of your life, if you'll let me." Catalina's heart swelled with emotion. She looked at him, her eyes shining with tears. "I'd like that," she whispered. As they left the restaurant hand in hand, Catalina knew that this was the beginning of something new, something beautiful. She had forgiven Alejandro, and he had proven himself to be a man worthy of her trust and her love. Together they would build a future filled with hope, redemption, and a love that had been years in the making. Alejandro lay awake, staring at the ceiling long after the clinic had quieted. Catalina Carlos. How had he not realized? The girl from the marketing department, eager, quiet, quick on her feet. He remembered now how she had been blamed for a disastrous quarterly report, how she had cried when security escorted her out. He hadn't looked into the case. His COO had assured him it was handled. One signature, one less problem. He hadn't thought about it again until now. Guilt crawled through him slow and sharp. He reached for the bedside table and pulled out his phone. With effort, he logged into his archived HR system. After several failed attempts and 2 password resets, he found the termination file. Catalina Carlos, dismissed for mishandling of financial presentation documents. No review, no appeal. Attached was a memo later forwarded privately to HR, stating that the department manager had admitted fault, but only after her dismissal. Alejandro's stomach twisted. He had ruined her career with a pen stroke, and now she had saved his life with both hands. He turned off the screen and lay in the dark, his breath shallow. He had built a career on decisiveness, on fast calls and clean breaks, but for the first time, he wondered how many others he had failed to see, and why did it matter so much that this woman, the one he had wronged the worst, had chosen to stay by his side. It mattered more than he was ready to admit. Alejandro didn't sleep that night, even after the monitors showed his vitals had returned to stable levels. After the nurses dimmed the lights and the clinic settled into its usual soft late-night hum, he lay awake, eyes wide open, jaw tight, mind spinning in relentless circles. The pulse monitor beeped in a steady rhythm, but his thoughts raced in a rhythm of their own. He couldn't stop thinking about what Catalina had said, her voice echoing through the sterile silence, low and edged with a pain he hadn't known he was capable of causing. He didn't even know my name. And the most damning part of it was, she was absolutely right. He hadn't at the time. She had been just another name in a stack of HR decisions, one file among dozens, a junior associate in a department flagged for inefficiencies. The quarterly report had been a disaster. A client had nearly walked away. The board was breathing down his neck, demanding accountability. His COO, Calvin Jensen, had assured him they had found the problem. She's young, sloppy, easily replaced. Alejandro hadn't questioned it. He had nodded, signed the termination letter, and moved on to the next crisis. The next morning, Catalina walked into Alejandro's room, her expression neutral but her eyes guarded. She checked his vitals, adjusted the IV drip, and made notes on her tablet, all without meeting his gaze. "Catalina," Alejandro said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. She paused but didn't look up. "Yes, Mr. Cole? I need to talk to you." Catalina finally looked at him, her eyes meeting his for a brief moment before she glanced away. "About what?" Alejandro took a deep breath. "About what happened 5 years ago. I looked into it. I saw the memo. I know you were set up." Catalina's hand stilled on the tablet, her knuckles turning white as she gripped it tighter. And I'm sorry," Alejandro said, his voice steady but filled with regret. "I should have looked into it. I should have asked questions. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Catalina's eyes widened slightly, surprise flickering across her face. She hadn't expected an apology, not from Alejandro Cole. She took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing just a fraction. "Thank you," she said softly. Alejandro watched her, his expression sincere. "I mean it, Catalina. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. I can't change what happened, but I can try to make it right." Catalina looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of insincerity. But all she saw was genuine regret. She nodded slowly. "Okay." Alejandro reached out, his hand hovering over hers for a moment before he pulled back. "I want to help. Whatever you need, whatever I can do to make this right, I will." Catalina's eyes shimmered with unshed tears, but she blinked them away. "I don't need anything from you, Alejandro. I just need you to get better." Alejandro nodded, understanding her need for space. "I will. And when I do, I'll make sure you get the recognition you deserve. I'll make sure everyone knows the truth." Catalina's lips trembled slightly, but she managed a small smile. "Thank you." As she turned to leave, Alejandro called out to her. "Catalina?" She paused, looking back at him. "Yes, thank you," he said softly, "for saving my life." Catalina's smile widened just a fraction. "You're welcome, Alejandro." As she left the room, Alejandro lay back against the pillows, his mind racing. He had a lot to make up for, and he was determined to do just that. For the first time in a long time, he felt a sense of purpose beyond his corporate ambitions. He felt a need to make things right, to redeem himself in the eyes of the woman who had saved his life. Rain lashed against the clinic windows, a steady downpour drumming like 1,000 tiny hammers against the roof. The storm had knocked out the power moments ago, plunging the entire building into semi-darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting a dim reddish glow down the narrow corridors. Catalina moved quickly but carefully, flashlight in hand, checking patient rooms and ensuring the backup generators were kicking in properly. Her rubber-soled shoes squeaked faintly against the linoleum floor as she rounded the corner near the recovery wing. Her thoughts were scattered, half on the storm, half on the way Alejandro had been quiet since their last conversation. He had not demanded his phone again. He had barely spoken, in fact. But she had felt his eyes on her more often, and in them something had shifted. No longer arrogance, not exactly guilt either, something closer to searching. As she reached for the supply closet door, her foot slid suddenly on an unseen puddle of water pulled from a leak in the ceiling. Catalina let out a sharp gasp as she lost her balance, her flashlight flying from her hand and clattering against the wall. In the split second between her slipping and the floor rushing up to meet her, she felt arms catch her, strong, steady, and too familiar to be anyone else. She looked up. Alejandro. He stood there in a loose gray patient tee, his IV band still taped to his arm, his expression tense. "I thought you were asleep," she breathed, stunned, still half in his arms. "I heard you fall," he said, his voice low and ragged. I didn't want to stay still. I was afraid that maybe this time I'd stand by and do nothing again." For a moment, neither of them moved. The storm outside roared on, but inside, the silence between them grew thick with something unspoken. Catalina was still in his arms, her hand curled unconsciously into the fabric of his shirt, her heartbeat echoing loud in her ears. His eyes were on hers, intense but unguarded. "I'm fine," she said, her voice softer now, almost a whisper. "I know," he replied, but he didn't let go. The moment stretched. She could feel his breath on her cheek, warm despite the chill in the air. His hands were gentle but firm on her waist, steadying her. She knew she should pull away, remind him he was still her patient, remind herself he was still the man who once ended her career. But she didn't, because right now, none of that felt as real as the way he was looking at her, not with power, not with pride, but with something like awe, like regret, like hope. "Catalina," he said, her name barely audible, like a confession. She stepped back gently and he let her go, reluctantly. Her cheeks were flushed, but not from the fall. "You should not be out of bed," she managed, reaching down for the flashlight. "I'll survive," he replied, watching her. She smiled, just a flicker, but it was there clearly. He chuckled softly, and it was the first time she'd heard it. It startled her more than anything else. It wasn't cold or calculated. It was warm, human. "Come on," she said, turning toward the hallway. "Let's get you back before Dr. Green finds out and sends you to the emergency room." Alejandro followed her, slower now, but still close. As they walked, he couldn't help but feel a warmth spread through him, a feeling of belonging, of finally letting go of the fears that had held him back for so long. The lights from the emergency systems flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the walls. Neither of them spoke again, but something in the air had changed. Their steps were more in sync, their silence more comfortable, and for the first time Catalina wondered if healing didn't only happen with medicine and monitors. Sometimes it began with a fall and the hands that chose to catch you. The clinic returned to normal in the days following the storm, but nothing between Catalina and Alejandro felt quite the same. He no longer demanded his phone the moment he woke. He read books Catalina brought him from the modest patient library, biographies, essays on leadership, even a medical memoir or two. He asked questions now, not out of impatience, but out of genuine curiosity. He started conversations, short at first, but increasingly sincere. More than once, Catalina caught him watching her, not in that arrogant, detached way from their past, but as if he was trying to understand her, trying to learn who she was now, not just who she had been then. One afternoon, Dr. Green stopped Catalina in the hallway, holding a folder. "You didn't tell me your community clinic project got green-lit," he said, smiling. Catalina froze. What? "The grant application you submitted last year? It's been approved. Full funding, equipment, personnel, even mobile units. The Whitmore Foundation signed off on it last week." Catalina took the folder in disbelief, her hands trembling as she flipped through the details. Her vision for affordable healthcare access in underserved neighborhoods brought to life, a dream she had nearly given up on. "But they rejected it months ago," she murmured. "I never resubmitted." Dr. Green shrugged. "Well, someone did. Under a partner organization, anonymous backing. It came through fast." Catalina clutched the folder to her chest, her heart racing. That evening, after most of the staff had gone home, she walked into Alejandro's room with the folder still in hand. He looked up from his book, then quickly registered the look on her face. "You knew," she said softly. He didn't deny it. "I may have spoken to someone quietly." "Why?" She paused, then closed the book. "Because I've spent a lot of time building things that only serve people like me," he said. "And when I saw what you were trying to build, I realized it mattered more." Catalina stood still, watching him. There was no performance in his voice, no business pitch, just a man trying to do the right thing. "I didn't want you to feel like it was a favor," he added, "or some apology. But it is, isn't it?" She looked down, the lump in her throat making it hard to speak. "It's what I should have done 5 years ago," he admitted. Catalina nodded slowly, swallowing the emotion building behind her ribs. "Thank you." A quiet understanding passed between them, something more profound than all the apologies in the world. In the days that followed, Alejandro asked if he could help, not as a donor, but as a partner. Catalina hesitated at first, but when she saw how he listened, truly listened, to community leaders, to her team, to the people they were trying to reach, she agreed. They started meeting regularly, sketching out plans, brainstorming outreach programs, designing mobile clinics. Alejandro brought strategy and access. Catalina brought heart and ground-level wisdom. Their rhythm became natural. He filled in the places where she needed structure. She softened the spaces he never realized were hard. Sometimes their hands brushed when reaching for the same blueprint. Sometimes their eyes lingered a little too long after a shared laugh, but they never rushed it. They let the moments unfold like slow-burning embers, catching light one by one. And slowly, steadily, the distance between them, once so vast and heavy with history, began to disappear, not with grand declarations, but with trust, with time, with two people choosing day by day to meet in the middle of who they were and who they were becoming. The call came on a crisp Thursday morning. Alejandro had just finished organizing supply deliveries for Catalina's community clinic when his phone buzzed. The number was familiar, his former board chairman, a man he had once reported to before he stepped down for medical leave. He hesitated before answering, a pit growing in his stomach even before a word was spoken. "Alejandro," the voice came through smoothly, "we want you back. The CEO seat is open." The vote was unanimous. The air around him shifted. New York, the boardroom, the skyscrapers, and six-figure deals. It was everything he had worked for, everything that once defined him, and yet it didn't feel like his life anymore. "I'll need some time," Alejandro replied calmly. "You've earned this," the man continued. "No one can lead like you, but you need to decide soon. People are waiting." He hung up, the silence in the room louder than any meeting. Alejandro sat back, his mind racing. He had a decision to make, one that would define the rest of his life. He thought about the man he used to be, driven, ambitious, ruthless. And he thought about the man he was becoming, compassionate, thoughtful, and dedicated to making a real difference. That evening, as Catalina walked into his room, she noticed the tension in his shoulders, the distant look in his eyes. "What's wrong?" she asked softly, sitting down beside him. Alejandro looked at her, his expression serious. "I got a call today. They want me back as CEO." Catalina's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her voice steady. "And what do you want?" Alejandro took a deep breath. "I want to stay here. I want to help you build something real, something that matters. I want to be a part of your life, Catalina." Catalina's eyes filled with tears, but she smiled. "Then stay. Stay and help me build something beautiful." Alejandro reached out, taking her hand in his. "I will. I promise." As they sat there, hand in hand, the future stretched out before them, full of hope, redemption, and a love that had been years in the making. Together, they would build a future filled with purpose, passion, and the joy of new beginnings. Alejandro had ever cheered. Later that evening, Alejandro climbed the stairs to the rooftop terrace of the clinic, a quiet place where he knew Catalina liked to go when the day felt heavy. The sun was dipping below the horizon, casting warm light across the buildings. Catalina stood at the railing, her hair pulled back, wind teasing loose strands around her face. She didn't turn when she heard him. She just smiled, sensing it was him. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said softly. "I think I saw my old self," Alejandro replied. She glanced at him, then curious. "They want me back," he said, CEO of the parent firm, Global Reach, full power. Catalina's expression didn't change. "Congratulations," she said after a pause. "But it would mean leaving," he added. "New York, the clinic, you." Now her face softened. "I figured that much." Alejandro stepped closer, his voice low and unsteady. "You know, I spent years making decisions that were purely logical, strategic, cold even. I thought that was strength. And now, she asked. "Now I realize," he said, meeting her eyes, "the strongest thing I could ever do is choose something that doesn't come with guarantees. Something that's messy and real." He took a breath. "I want to stay here with you, with this mission, this clinic. It's the first thing that's ever felt like it matters." Catalina's eyes shimmered in the fading light. "You don't have to give up everything," she whispered. "I'm not," he said. "I'm trading up, trading power for purpose, profit for presence. I don't want to be a man who wins deals and loses the one person who made him want to be better." Silence wrapped around them like a soft blanket. Then, slowly, Catalina reached for his hand. He took it like it was the first real thing he had ever held. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by city lights and the hum of life continuing below, Alejandro made the most important decision of his life. Not for shareholders, not for headlines, but for the one heart that had taught his own how to feel again. The ribbon stretched across the entrance of the brand-new Community Health Center, fluttered in the breeze, its white silk glowing under the soft morning sun. Rows of folding chairs lined the courtyard, filled with community members, local leaders, clinic staff, and press. Balloons danced gently in the wind, children giggled in the background, and in the center of it all stood a sleek plaque that read, "Moore and Cole Hope Center." Catalina stood at the podium, elegant and calm, dressed in white with her signature name tag pinned just over her heart. Her speech had been heartfelt, filled with gratitude and vision, honoring the patients who had inspired the mission, the team who had built it, and the city that had embraced their cause. When she stepped down, Alejandro stepped up. He wore a navy suit without a tie, his smile softer now, his posture more human than powerful. He adjusted the mic, his eyes searching for hers in the front row, and when he found them, the world around him disappeared. "I used to live by numbers," he began, his voice deep but steady. "Quarterly reports, market shares, margins. Every decision, every person was a calculation." He paused, his gaze never leaving Catalina, until one day I signed a paper that I didn't read. And that paper ended a woman's career, someone who should have been seen, nurtured, believed in. But I didn't see her. The crowd hushed. And then, one day, years later, I collapsed and woke up to the same woman saving my life. Not once, but over and over again. Catalina's eyes were already glistening. Alejandro stepped out from behind the podium holding a small velvet box in his hand. "I've signed thousands of contracts in my life, some of them worth millions. But today I'm here because I want to sign something else, something worth more than any deal I've ever made." He stopped in front of her. "Something worth more than any deal I've ever made." Gasps rippled through the crowd as Alejandro dropped to one knee. "Catalina Carlos," he said, his voice low but unwavering, "you saw the best in me when I only showed you the worst. You gave me purpose when I thought I was only power. You healed my heart in every way that mattered. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled down Catalina's cheeks as she laughed through her sob. "Yes," she whispered, nodding before her voice found its strength. "Yes, Alejandro, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose to kiss her. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Children clapped, doctors whistled, and even the mayor wiped a tear from his cheek. But for Catalina and Alejandro, there was no sound, just the echo of one choice, one love that had rewritten both their stories. That evening, the celebration gave way to silence. The two of them walked hand in hand along the beach just outside the city, barefoot in the cool sand. The orange sky cast long shadows behind them, the waves whispering at their feet, the sea calm as if honoring the peace they had found in each other. Catalina leaned her head on Alejandro's shoulder. "If I hadn't saved you that night," she murmured, her voice wrapped in wind and warmth, "everything would be different." Alejandro's fingers tightened around hers. "If you hadn't saved me," he said, "maybe I'd still be alive, but I wouldn't be living." He turned to her, brushing a kiss gently across her forehead. And for once, there was no past haunting them, no future frightening them, only the present, filled with trust, with purpose, and with a love so hard-earned, so deeply healed, it needed no more words. Just the sound of waves and the beating of two hearts that had finally come home. Thank you for staying with us through this unforgettable journey, a story of redemption, second chances, and a love that was born not in perfection, but in healing. If Catalina and Alejandro's story touched your heart, reminded you that people can change, that wounds can heal, and that love often finds us in the most unexpected places, please show your support. Like this story, if it touched your heart. Share it with friends and family who love a good romance. Subscribe to stay updated with more captivating stories like this one. Your support means the world to us. Stay tuned for more emotional and engaging tales.